exclusive story setting the national news agenda of the day. I'm going to go straight across to Shaman Sen and also Niranjan, who's going to get us this big story.
Well, thank you very much, Shivagi, for taking us through some of the details. So what we are going to do right now is that big story that we are breaking right now is the charges that have been leveled against Amnesty. In fact, Republic TV is the first news network to get their hands on the charge sheet to debunk the theories that have been floated all this while. Remember, several charges being leveled by the Amnesty as far as saying that these are malicious charges. But let's take a look at the charges that have been leveled against Amnesty. Now, we've accessed the full charge sheet, part one of the story that we're putting out right now about the foreign contributions that have been received by this NGO called Amnesty, and what were they actually using this money for? Foreign remittances of about over 50 crore rupees that was received by Amnesty. Why is it that this becomes a violation? Because remember, every NGO actually has to obtain certain permissions from the government in order to receive foreign remittances. In fact, back in the year 2011 and 2012, when foreign contributions were actually received by Amnesty, about 1 crore rupees, remember that was the very time when there was an adverse report that was filed by the Ministry of Home Affairs saying that they cannot receive these foreign remittances. Let's take a look at the charge sheet that has been accessed. Let me just quickly show you. This is the charge sheet. Perhaps in a short while from now, Niranjan can also come in to show you all the details of the charge sheet that has been accessed. 16 important points coming up from this particular charge sheet that has been accessed. Point number one, this is what the charge sheet reads. Says permission or registration has been denied to Amnesty International India Foundation Trust. There was adverse inputs that were received from the security agencies during the year 2011 and 2012. This answers the question when they essentially say that this was a witch hunt carried out by the government. But let's just remind our viewers right now that back in 2011 and 2012, that was the time when adverse reports were basically filed against Amnesty International. FCRA permissions were not granted. But despite that, this organization received funds from the United Kingdom. For more on this, I'm also joined by my colleague Niranjan from the Mumbai newsroom. We're going to put out full details of the charge sheet. 16 important points, Niranjan, emerging from this charge sheet that has now been accessed by Republic TV.
And some of these documents that you have shared, I have it with me. And some of the biggest takeaways, Shavan, from this document is that it's clear that many of these so-called projects were for commercial gains. So if my video journalist can just zoom in, you try and zoom into this. Okay, let's take this one. It's a little clearer. If you take this copy, look at this, right? It appears that some of those people who spoke to the Enforcement Directorate on record, Shavan, the document is on your screen and even you're on the screen. And the Kashmir Access to Justice project, for example, look at this. 46,867 pounds charged, okay? So let's look at this. The terms of contracts entered into between Amnesty India and Amnesty International. So Amnesty International sends money to Amnesty India to carry out projects. Now, what are these projects and how much are they spending? Take a look at this. So remember all those, the details about Kashmir advocacy. On Kashmir, nearly 46,867 pounds. That is nearly 47 lakh rupees, right? Similarly, there is a human cost of coal research project, for example, which they have billed about $90,000. $90,000 would be about roughly, about 70 to 80 lakh rupees. Now, similarly, it appears, I'm just looking at the kind of issues they've picked up, project database maintenance support, etc. Then they talk about justice for under trials, access to justice research. So, such projects being billed for nearly like half a crore, 1 crore. And I think the only news point that comes out of this is about how it was essentially a commercial project, commercial project. Shavan, you'll be able to tell us more. They've called it criminal conspiracy as well, Shavan, on how they try to bring in foreign monies in the guise of these projects.
Well, in fact, Niranjan, let me just take you through the details that is coming in from the charge sheet and why these, when you say these are commercial activities, and wherein lies the problem. Take a look at what the Enforcement Directorate has to say. They say that the company Amnesty International India Private Limited is registered under Code 85 of the Company Act in the MCA, while objective of the company is profitability. However, non-profit organizations are generally registered under Code 85. Under Code 85, they say that clearly shows that the objective of the company not commensurate with the activities carried out. So let me just try and explain this to all our viewers. Wherein lies the problem? One, they did not have the FCRA permissions in order to receive the foreign remittances. So what do they really do? The allegation here is that Amnesty floated two other companies here, or rather firms here in India. Now, these firms were essentially receiving money from the parent company from the United Kingdom. What were they showing it as? They were showing us this as the export of services. Export of services. And what was the export of services? Is that list of reports that they have prepared. What Niranjan was pointing out. So they are saying we're exporting these services to Amnesty in United Kingdom. And for this, they've got over 50 crore rupees. 50 crore rupees that has come in from Amnesty International based out of United Kingdom. And let's not forget the fact that FDI, they were actually receiving foreign direct investment. As an NGO, they were not entitled to receive foreign direct investment. In fact, if you take a look at this particular chart sheet, in which Niranjan, in one point, they make a clear case. Here they're saying it has appeared that AIIPL was misusing the funds received in the guise of FDI for other activities, charity, contribution to fund such trust, which was no way connected to activities for which the FDI had been received, and getting contribution from the overseas donor to expand its NGO activities under the mask of services constantly. So that basically points out the entire illegality that we are talking about, the illegality that perhaps Amnesty will now have to, they have to basically debunk in the court, saying, because all this while they're saying that these are false charges that have been leveled against them, and the fact that these were charges, this is nothing but a witch hunt that has been carried out by the present political dispensation. But let's not forget, it was back in 2011, 2012 when the FCRA permission was not granted, when this government was not in power. Second very important point here is that they were aware that there are certain norms under which every NGO operates in this country. If that is the case, then why exactly were they not following the legal route? What is it that they wanted to really hide? Because the question here is that when you do not have the permissions, you are still receiving foreign remittances. And to bypass the FCRA violations, what were you exactly doing? You were floating another firm, and those firms were receiving the funds from the parent company, and the parent company was actually sending in money in multiple tranches. Let me also bring in Swapnil Kothari, who's joining us on this broadcast. Swapnil, we've accessed the charge sheet, the attachment order, documents which go on to indicate that there are some very serious charges against Amnesty. If they have nothing to really hide, then why exactly bypass the FCRA norms that have been laid out? And let's not forget that these services or these permissions were taken away from them back in 2011, 2012. So this entire argument that there is a political witch hunt that has been carried out does not really stand.
Shravan, congratulations once again to you and the entire Republic TV team for unearthing this scandal. I had heard about this scandal since quite some time, and it was only a matter of time before Republic TV broke it to the people. And this is not news to me. Most of these organizations tend to work under this kind of a garb, and FCRA is violated just as the way, red lights are violated in our country while driving a car. So I'm not surprised that the ED has raided Amnesty, and I'm sure they'll dig a lot more out of it, and there'll be not only violations of the FCRA, but including FEMA, including Companies Act, and all the other attendant laws which I can think of. IPC will also come into the picture, and I'm sure the charge sheet will be increased a little bit more to add more sections to it, because otherwise if you do not add certain sections to it, I don't know what the sections are, how comprehensive they are, because if you do not add them, then it doesn't really, cut eyes. FCRA alone is not enough, Shravan.
Swapnil, I just want you to help our viewers. Swapnil, I just want you to help our viewers understand. You would understand the legalities much better and explain it to our viewers. What I understand from this particular charge sheet is that A, this is an NGO receiving foreign direct investment. As per rules, you cannot do that because you are not entitled to receive foreign direct investment. Secondly, as far as FCRA violations are concerned, back in 2011 and 2012, there were adverse reports that were submitted to the Ministry of Home Affairs. FCRA permission was cancelled, which means foreign remittances cannot be received by this organization. What they do in turn is come up with 2 new firms, and these new firms were getting money directly from United Kingdom, and then they say that these were for exporting services to the parent company. I want you to help our viewers understand the legality. Where is the illegality in this?
Well, the illegality is right there because in law, what you cannot do directly, you cannot even do indirectly. So what here has happened is that you floated shell companies precisely for the purpose, under the garb of saying that we are exporting our services. And since we are exporting our services, we are entitled to foreign remittances, which in turn go to the organizations which are hitherto banned from receiving foreign currency, remittances. So that the answer is very clear there. If you do not have the permissions, you've sidestepped those permissions and you've floated shell companies precisely for that. And most of these shell companies, as you are aware, Shravan, in a lot of money laundering cases, including, Mehul Choksi and the like, that you've seen most of these shell company cases, shell companies were formed with fake board meetings, with paper meetings that never actually happened, simply to pass on resolutions to ensure that foreign currencies or certain LODR or certain, credit, remittances or credit facilities from the banks have been taken only for that purpose, when you know that the purpose is entirely different and completely against the law. So this is very, very clear and very simple. So I am sure that, as I keep saying, that FCRA alone will not be attracted. There have to be other sections also under the IPC Companies Act, because who were the directors of these companies and how the hell they did what they did. So obviously those also need to be put in the dock, because a company by itself cannot be cross-questioned. It has to be a human being who needs to be interrogated. So when you deal with corporate frauds, it is to be very comprehensively tackled. It cannot be just cosmetic.
I have this beautiful document here in front of me. Swapnil Kothari, I have Deshwata Nigam also joining us, and a story broken by Shravan Sen. And look at this, okay? Deshwatan and Swapnil, both of you listen to this. On Kashmir, who wouldn't love this job? I mean, on Kashmir Access to Justice Research Project, they funneled in nearly 47 lakh rupees for a project, okay? Coal research project, almost about 60 to 70 lakh. Field testing technology, I don't know what it is, but francs, 80,000 francs. And then there's some database maintenance for which there are, thousands of pounds. And then there is under trials project, 75 lakh rupees. Justice research, I mean, I don't know, it just goes on and on. Coal sector everywhere. And these are, I repeat, commercial intent projects. Commercial intent projects, which means for a layman, there is something called an Amnesty, which calls itself an NGO, which was making millions using such issues which were fanciable in India. Deshwatan.
Yes. In fact, Amnesty has been long been under the radar of Indian authorities. They have, in fact, siphoning off funds in the name of international grants and misusing it. In fact, their anti-India propaganda was also quite known. Apart from violation of the FCRA, as pointed out by Swapnil, there is also a money laundering aspect which the ED is responsible for. And the people who are responsible for day-to-day affairs of that NGO in India, and also the apex body abroad, which the body here. So parent body, people who are responsible should also be prosecuted. So it is a very dangerous thing, because they have been known for disruption in India, various economic activities and creating problems. And there was no transparency in the NSC. Where the money was coming, and accordingly their license was cancelled. It should be gone in deep. Here FCRA, crimes that are being investigated will not suffice. Everybody has to be brought under the net who were responsible for running this organization, and the parent organization also has to be brought in net, because they were the ones who were controlling this organization.
Yeah, my colleague Abhishek is also joining us live, I think, Shravan breaking the story. And Shravan has accessed the full file, the attachment order, the entire enforcement directorate file on Amnesty, and it's bringing out a lot of uncomfortable details. Shravan, Abhishek is also joining us. I think both of you have gone through the details of these documents. Yes, you can take the next question with Abhishek. I think Abhishek also has gone through some of the documents, and I just saw one interesting mention here, Shravan. If I can just show that mention and then hand it over to you and Abhishek both. Look at this. The enforcement directorate says that this clearly shows that the objective of the company was not commensurate with the activities being carried out. So a lot of shady activity, basically, a lot of shady activity that was passed off as NGO work. Shravan, is that what the ED believes? Back to you.
Well, partly yes, Niranjan, because what is really happening is that there are a few companies that one has to look into it. It starts with a company which goes by the name, or rather a trust, if I may say so, Amnesty International India Foundation Trust. Now, this trust, they did not have the FCRA permission. It was withdrawn. So what they do in turn is they come up with two other firms, which is Amnesty International India Private Limited, which is AIIPL, and they also come up with another, Indians Amnesty International Trust. So a same group with same directors, interestingly with the same address. When the searches were basically carried out, most of these directors were operating out of the same very place. So to which the enforcement directorate is saying, it is clearly seen that both the entities have mostly common directors, trustees, common function, common source of funding. So two firms getting money from one firm, that is the Amnesty International United Kingdom. So the moment it is stopped by the Ministry of Home Affairs, so in order to bypass that, they create two others. They are the ones who are receiving the funds. Now, to answer your question, that what was it being used for? They say it was for exporting of services. So what the enforcement directorate does is that they ask the question, why don't you furnish documentary evidence in terms whether there are any sort of invoices, how did the money really come in? Now, what's very interesting, this is what the enforcement directorate says. No documentary proof for the alleged export, such as invoices and copies of the agreement between AIIPL and Amnesty International UK has been furnished by AIIPL to the authorized dealer bank. Now, that's what the enforcement directorate has to say. Abhishek, I want to just bring you in. Now, they say that this is a political witch hunt. And this is what comes out from the documents is that the FCRA permissions were not granted back in 2011 and 2012. So point number one is that what political witch hunt are you really talking about? Because the Ministry of Home Affairs at that point in time came up with an adverse report. And that is the reason why your FCRA permission was cancelled. And secondly, why actually come up with two other firms with common directors and then say that we are receiving fund from only one single source? The single source happens to be the parent company. So wouldn't questions essentially be raised as to why, if you were actually doing all this because you had a certain agenda or you had a certain sort of an objective, then why not put that out in public domain by simply saying that there is no such violations that have taken place, rather than going round all this whataboutery, saying that this is all political witch hunt?
Shravan, in fact, all this claim of witch hunt is nothing but mens rea, guilty mind. If you look at this entire structure, as you were explaining, this was essentially aimed at bypassing the censors of the Ministry of Home Affairs, not just censors, the entire mechanism of monitoring of these kind of foreign money inflow into India and the purposes for which it is used. Now, I am really finding it preposterous, the kind of words as it comes out from the charge sheet that you have brought out, Shravan. And Niranjan, it's so interesting. When Akar Patel was asked about the agreement between AIIPL and Amnesty International UK, the contract based on which all the money came, and the services that were delivered. Now, the contract was for some services to be delivered by Amnesty India to Amnesty UK. What were those services for which the money was paid? He says campaigning for human rights, but then when the officers asked that campaigning for human rights is is something for which you should have MHA clearance and FCRA clearance. He says, no, this is a commercial activity with lot of scope in India, that there is possibility of future growth and India can be a leading provider of these services. Human rights, campaigning for human rights is a commercial activity according to Amnesty International or their India head Akar Patel. I don't think it can get more preposterous than that, Shravan. And Niranjan, this is going to be a big embarrassment for the Lutyens gang. This is going to be a big embarrassment for the lobby, which always stood behind the likes of Akar Patel, and Amnesty in fact used their reports to slam the government. It is not about the present government, Shravan and Niranjan. It is about the manner in which Amnesty has conducted itself over the last few years and decades in India and perhaps elsewhere in the world. This really brings out the conspiracy element within some people who perhaps use Amnesty as a platform to browbeat governments, to compromise national security. Imagine the reports that were provided by Amnesty International on Kashmir became tools in the hands of people who wanted to embarrass India. So obviously this was done by design, this was done to an objective, done to an agenda, and this charge sheet really calls the bluff of human rights being the ultimate objective. It was, as it comes out, for them also a commercial activity.
Well, Abhishek, multiple questions being raised, and of course you've raised that fantastic point which we were thinking we'll delve into in a short while from now. Why most of these activities that they were talking about, or what they call export of services. Now what's very interesting, these are all that you're talking about. The list that was read out by Niranjan, they say that this was all to do with export of services, and this was exporting to whom? Their parent company, Amnesty International, based out of United Kingdom, for which they were receiving the money. Now they are basically dubbing all of this by saying these are commercial activities. If they are at all, now for a moment, for the sake of argument, if they are commercial activities, then yes, you would be having the invoices. Yes, you would have some sort of a documentary evidence. Why